Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most, and I get to tell you about my BFF, my best friend forever, Jared Nilles, who passed away years ago, but we get to reminisce in this episode. If you've ever sat down with friends and had a good laugh thinking about a good friend, that's what Tucker and I get to do today. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Tucker, we're recording this on March 19th, 2023, just for some straight up reference as I get into this. But I wanted to make this episode about some memories I have about Jared Nilles, who we found out had died in a train accident 11 years ago today.
Oh, this is the anniversary.
This is the anniversary.
Okay, rest in peace, Jared Nilles.
Jared and I were we were tight, super friends. And I want to kind of tell the legend of Jared through the lens of my eye. Okay, so I would have been a junior in high school, and my sister started dating, as much as you can date someone who's a sophomore dating a freshman, this twerpy, lanky idiot who I knew was involved in some theater stuff. He didn't do plays or the musical, but he really wanted to be an improv. Really, really wanted to be an improv. But hadn't auditioned yet, or maybe auditioned and didn't make it. I don't remember, if I'm going to be honest. And so
that surprises me, actually, that he wouldn't have made it through an audition for high school improv.
But think about this. If no one knew him at all, like if you just saw this kid with spastic energy coming at you, it's like, oh, not him.
I guess I'm used to the Northside Improv where we just take everyone.
Yeah, we'll just be like, hey, listen, you ready?
Do you have a pulse?
I don't do that anymore.
Good for you.
I made it an audition club, much to the chagrin of some children, I'm sure.
Yeah, life's a bitch and then you die.
Yep, exactly. It's good that you learn this now, though,
yeah,
because rejection's something that happens to everybody. So my sister starts dating this kid, and I remember every time I would come home, because you remember what it was like being involved in extracurriculars in high school. Sometimes you wouldn't get home till like 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
Yep. You were at school by 7 a.m. You're coming home late. And so I'd come home and I just wanted a soup, just a bowl of soup. And all of a sudden Jared would come downstairs and be like, hey, you guys doing some improv? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, God, just shut up. I can't stand you. You're the worst. And I'm also like, get out of my sister's bedroom, you friggin' creep. Like, she's a freshman. She's 15 years old. You creep. So Jared and Christy end up breaking up after like 4 months.
Ooh, who broke up with who?
I don't know. I should ask my sister that. I don't recall. But immediately I became friends with him after that. Like, he made his way in. And I remember one specific time where he and Travis Steffen decided that they were going to put a bug in my living room while Dustin Buchanan, Jake Harchie, and I had an improv meeting. And the way that they bugged my living room was they took a 2-way walkie-talkie, a broken pencil, a rubber band. So they rubber banded the like call button down on it.
Yeah, that's smart.
And then taped it to the like under part of the dining room or the living room table that we had. Now, they probably would have gotten away with a lot of stuff that sounded like this. Because what are you going to really hear? It's underneath the table.
Sure.
These are not modern recording.
To be fair,
techniques.
you, Dushy, and Jake, all loudspeakers.
True that. True that. Also, it's also ballsy to think that we were going to be in the living room.
And
right?
I guess, did they feel that, okay, I want to see what they say about us?
No, I doubt it. I think they wanted to know whatever it was we were meeting about. And to be honest, it's probably like, okay, you make the poster for the show this week, and like there was nothing of importance that we would have ever been talking about.
What year would this have been?
2001.
Okay, because I was going to say Dustin would have been a senior, right?
Yep, it would have been the spring of 2001.
And Jake was still at South.
Okay. And the reason we ended up finding the bug was the batteries that they put in there must not have
Usually
been.
that means something really small that you hide in like a lamp. They'd fucking tape the fucking talkie.
And so we heard beep, beep, beep. We're like, what the hell is that? And finally we look underneath this table and we see this. I mean, we're talking like Ram Jam, this Hail Mary attempt at this. And so we all do exactly what you'd imagine. Jake puts his finger to his nose and his lips, and we silently take it down. We look at it. We assess what's going on. We know, and I swear to God, on the back of it, it said like property of T. Stefan. Right? We instantly knew what was going on. And so the next day we had to do announcements for our school, and because we had to promote our improv show, and we wrote an announcement about someone bugging. They're like, it'd be really smart for us to have an improv show. You know, it wouldn't be smart to put a walkie-talkie underneath the table. And I heard through the grapevine that Jared just about pissed his pants. Oh my God, I got totally caught. What am I gonna do? So it becomes this little thing where he's like, I'm so sorry. And I was like, hey, don't worry about it. I mean, that was stupid, but we weren't doing anything important, so I don't really care, right? Like,
so they knew that a meeting was going to happen in your living room. They knew somehow to get in there in enough time to set up the walkie-talkie, and then to be a fairly close distance to it to be able to hear anything.
I imagine parked on a side street.
Okay.
You know?
I mean, yeah, even that would be kind of far, if not just hiding in your backyard somewhere. What were they in the improv club at that moment?
No. Travis never was. Jared got in halfway through his sophomore year or at the end of his sophomore year.
Was the hope was to get something damning on you guys so he could, like, hey, either you get me in here,
I don't know,
or I release what you said to Jake.
Here's the other thing too, like they definitely were not recording it. So at that point, it's a best case scenario. You know, it'd be like if I came in and I was like, Tucker, recently I heard this person say this about you. What's your reaction? And you're like, well, how do you know that? I can't divulge.
I spied on them. I mean, really, what the conversation I was assuming would have been like, so you guys want to do scenes from a hat? Yeah, let's do scenes from a hat. That's really funny.
Yes, 100%.
Do we need new shirts? I don't think we need new shirts. I mean, maybe order some for the new kids, but no, just leave the colors. That sounds good. What do you want to do? Can we do the Lion King skit? Love the Lion King skit.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Also, let's hold Jared down and do whatever.
Let me tell you something. In the amount of time that you just had describing what this meeting could have been, it was 10 times longer and half as much was done and accomplished.
Because most of it was around the fact that someone was spying on you.
I mean, eventually we were maybe 5 minutes in. That's the thing too, is like this little thing started chirping immediately for us. So that's one of my introductions to who Jared Ralph Nilles was. And we ended up having a very fast friendship. He's the kind of kid that almost anyone could get along with, but also people were just completely frustrated by him. It was hard not to like Jared in the respect that he got along with everybody, right? Mm-hmm. So it didn't matter who you were, he got along with you.
Very charismatic.
The dude was made out of rubber. I think by the time he passed, his foot looked more like the foot of an ancient dinosaur because he had broken his toes so many times that nothing was straight. It was all kind of turned and curled around. It's pretty nasty, actually, if you ask me. And these are some of the highlights of Jared Nilles and JJ Gordon having adventures together. I've spoken fondly many times of my time in Rutland, North Dakota. And at the end of my senior year of high school, I got a call through a kid I went to high school with. His aunt ran a theater program to fill time for kids between baseball ending and school beginning. They're like, we got 3 weeks. We got to find something for these kids to do, or they're going to go crazy in this town. And we got to, it's a small rural community, so they're too young to work.
Mm-hmm.
They're too young to be driving a grain cart.
Unless daddy's too drunk.
Right. But not old enough to like drive over to the other town to take swimming lessons or something.
Right.
And so they offered me $1,000 and a house to live in for 3 weeks. And I was like, oh my God, $1,000 and at my own house. And I'm a senior in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
That freedom sounds amazing. And what I envisioned in my mind was Andy of Mayberry, right?
Oh, sure.
I pictured people coming over with pies and
Right.
like, hey, let's get to know our rural neighbors. Nothing like that.
No.
Not one iota.
Desolate.
But that was probably good for Jared and I, because Jared and I had to get to know each other on a much deeper basis than we had ever had before. And our very first night there, so we stopped and got like $150 worth of groceries before we left town. And we don't know what this place is going to look like, right? So we brought a TV and a DVD player and a bunch of movies that we could watch. I brought my computer. There's no internet access. Mm-hmm. We're in the infancy of, what the internet was for us at that time.
Most of us didn't have cell phones at the time.
Right. I had I believe it was a Verizon cell phone. No, I had a Sprint cell phone that had no coverage down there. No coverage. One day we drove around for 2 hours until we got to the top of a hill, and all of a sudden, bloop, bloop, it had some coverage. And I'm like, oh my God. There's no telephone in this little house that someone was renting out. It was somebody's mother's house, and the mother had died, 15 years before. So they left all of her furniture in there, and they're like, we'll just rent it out whenever someone needs it. And the very first night we went down there, Jared and I had a very unhealthy competition with each other for everything. Who was better at improv? Who got the most ladies? That was 100% Jared. Who was better at improv? I'm gonna say me, without a doubt. I could have performed the shit out of that kid. But we competed about everything. So one of the things we didn't even know we needed to compete about was who can be better at running a grill.
Oh,
and
sure.
So Jared's like, I'll grill the burgers. You do the rest. I'm like, oh, okay.
He picked the easiest thing.
Right. So it's a kettle grill. So a charcoal kettle grill. And it's, it's been like 45 minutes. I've got the little table for us all set and it's ready to go. I got chip dips out. I got the pickles. We're ready to eat. So he brings in the burgers and they are black on the outside. They are completely charred. So I'm like, okay. So I pop down a bun. I take one bite. They may be charred on the outside, but they are raw hamburger in the middle.
I just set them on fire, basically.
Right? And I'm like, what? And also they taste friggin' disgusting.
Probably like butane or whatever.
They do. They taste like lighter
I
fluid.
remember seing, laying in one of the rooms and seeing a glow outside, and it was him and Jake just taking turns spraying butane into the fire so it would blow up.
So what had happened was, you open, there's two ways oxygen gets into a kettle grill. One is on the top on the lid, and that's how you can kind of control a little bit of like how much smoke is left in there. But there's also one underneath the coals, and the one underneath the coals provides oxygen to the fire that burns. Sure. He didn't bother opening that, so it never got any oxygen. So he'd keep taking this thing out, and these coals would not look like they're lit. So he'd spray more lighter fluid on it, ignite the lighter fluid, which does not need as much oxygen, and the top is open, over and over and over again. So it was just perfect, right? Because at that point out, I'm like, you're never going to grill again. Like, you've lost the privilege on day one of being able to do this. And one of our favorite games that we invented in the 5 years, we went to Rutland for 5 years. We were the longest running people that they had back. And in all honesty, by the time the 6th year rolled around, we weren't connecting with the kids as much as we were when we were 18, 19, 20 years old. Yeah. They had never had a male director, and they certainly had never had two young male directors. And so we brought energy like there was no tomorrow. And younger kids, they got more boys to participate than they had ever had before. And I think we lost some of the older, like high school age girls that had done it previously because they're like, well, you mean they're not doing a melodrama musical? No, we wrote like the first year we did a, what's it called? It's not a melodrama. A murder mystery.
Sure.
It was called The Merry Murders at Montmarie. And it was about a girls' boarding school.
Did you write that?
No. That one was scripted. It was a scripted 3-act that we quickly were like, oh my God, we chose something.
A 3-act?
A 3-act that was light years beyond the reading comprehension of these kids. And the premise was it was a girls' boarding school, and all of the girls had fathers who were powerful or affluent, and they had kidnapped their fathers and were keeping them in the basement to try and like usurp something or other. And so we figured out right away, we're like, oh, okay. So the second year we chose 2 1-acts. One was called Night of the Livid Dad, and it kind of had a little bit of a what if quality to it, where it's about a dad who is worried about his daughter going on her first date and then envisioning the different types of men who might come to pick him up. So one was like a snowboarding dude, and another one was like a biker, and that was pretty fun. And the other one we did, the other 1-act was called Express Line, which I have directed now 4 times.
Really?
It is a delightful 1-act that's easy to stage. It all takes place in a grocery store at the check stand.
Okay.
And it is about a woman who will not let 12 items go through a 10 item or less line. She puts her foot down, and the guy who's there he and his wife are trying to get through quickly. And so he debates a bunch of things. So they come up with stuff like saying, okay, well, I've got 2 things of cottage cheese. Why don't I get 1 thing of cottage cheese? She goes, that's great, but you still end up with 11 items. He's like, well, I've got beer in here. There's 6 individual bottles. She's like, but they're packaged together as a 6-pack. It goes back and forth, and it is just, it's an awesome show. In that second year, I told Jared, listen, I was the head director the first year. You be the head director this year. And every year we split the money 50-50, whatever we got paid. So that first year I gave him $500, and the second year they paid me $500 and him $1,000. So he gave me $250. So we both got $750 for it. Mm-hmm. And we would listen to, after we got our check, which happened on the closing night of the show while strike was going on, we would go back to our little house and blare Will Smith's Wild Wild West and like dance around with our checks because we were so excited about what we did. And truth be told, between gas, stuff that we bought ourselves for the production, I bet you every year we lost money on Rutland. Every year we lost money.
Yeah, because you didn't really have a budget. They weren't expensing things.
Bingo.
Yeah, right.
So the third year was maybe my favorite year because we wrote a sketch show called A Rutland State of Mind. And it was a mixture of original sketches and then some of the best sketches of all time that these kids had never, ever seen. So, for example, the Dead Parrot sketch, right? Mm-hmm. So we created a fake pet store called Uncle Terry's Pets. And we had these twin boys that we called the Raspies because both of them had a real raspy voice like this. Justin, Julian. They were and tiny little guys. They were tiny little guys. And so we would do this gag, like it was the Dead Parrot sketch, but then we also added where it's like, I need to see your manager. Okay. So he would walk behind this revolving door and the twin brother would come out wearing a mustache and goes, hello, I'm the manager. And he goes, no, you're not. You're the same guy wearing a mustache. I assure you, sir, I am not. And he'd be arguing back and forth, and he'd say the exact same thing that happened. So we updated the Dead Parrot. If Monty Python had access to twins, they would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
We also, do you remember when Jim Carrey hosted Saturday Night Live in the late 90s? He did a sketch where he was a lifeguard for a hot tub.
Hot tub, yep.
So we put a kiddie pool on stage with water. It was so much fun. Then so that was year 3. The 4th year, they said, listen, you have got to do something with music in it. The grandpas and grandmas are fed up with these things. Don't get us wrong. They've had a good time, but it's time that you guys stretch your legs a little bit. And Jared hates musicals, right? Which is funny because he's good friends with me.
Yep.
On a trip that we took once to Los Angeles and then Tijuana, we'll get to that in a moment, he was just miserable because I had gotten my first iPod ever, and I loaded it up with comedy albums and musicals. Congratulations, Jared. So we decide, okay, listen, if we're going to do a musical, we can't do a standard musical because we don't know how to do that. And, can you even get click tracks to something like that? So we wrote the show ourselves. We did Rutland State of Mind. It shouldn't be that hard. And so, what was it called? Take the Money and Run is the name of the show we wrote. And it is about a bank robbery. And we both were super obsessed with the Akira Kurosawa film Rashomon at that time.
Oh, my God.
Right? So we took that premise, which is...
Was he making the Tidy Whitey at this point?
He had.
Okay.
He had made
so he was in film
Tidy.
school.
Yep. Oh, yeah. So he would have been a junior going on his senior year, the first year. The second year when we did the one acts, that was his senior summer. So he'd be a sophomore in college at this point already.
He's the only person I've ever known who told me to my face, it's not really filmmaking if you're not shooting on film.
Oh, God, yeah.
I was like, Jared, that's stupid.
And I'll tell you a story about how great of a filmmaker he was, too, coming up. Don't let me forget that one. So we write this script that is a bank robbery. A bank has been robbed, and a kid that we called Touch Me John, because
do you remember John? I remember Touch Me John very well.
You'd be sitting there and all of a sudden he'd like crawl up into your lap and like want to be swaddled like a baby.
No sense of personal space.
Right. Also, first of all, he's a full-on genius. The kid like tested through the roof and like believe like his family, like they grew corn and like they had like a pig operation. And I was like, do they even know what they've got? And so I remember chatting with his parents once, and they're like, yeah, our son is a genius. And now he's pioneered some kind of soil sample technique. I run into him every now and then at like trade shows for agriculture.
It wasn't his dad who kidnapped us, was it?
No.
That was a different kid's dad.
No, that was another kid's dad.
Yeah.
Well, we should talk about that too.
I mean, yeah. Jared was basically along for the ride with that
he
one.
He was. With the time we got kidnapped looking for a new car for Tucker.
Yeah.
So... John, Touch Me John, is we had nicknames for all these kids. We had one kid that we called Fester because he reminded us of Fester Adams. The Raspies. Pathetic Ray was another kid that we had.
You know what? It would have been lovely would have been to do a retelling of Wet Hot American Summer with those kids.
Well, it would have been glorious. So the premise is this cop shows up to investigate what's going on, and he interviews everybody, and each person has a different interpretation of how the robbery went. So, for example, we built this fat suit and this giant mustache for the kid who played Sunburn. I think his real name was Nick, but we called him Sunburn. Sunburn. And we never let the kids know their nicknames until years later.
Yeah, how does it feel to be like, you called me Touch Me John? Well, you're always touching people, John.
Right, exactly.
You wouldn't stop.
So this kid played an old security guard, and a bunch of ninjas robbed it. And so we had them sing the song, everybody was kung fu fighting. And so they had these big like kung fu movements and stuff like that. Shelly Fink, who's been on our podcast a few times, she was one of the tellers, but she sang the song. Oh God. Oh, I wish it could come to me. It's a story of like, this is a story about Billy Joe and Bobby Sue, two young lovers with nothing much else to do. And like they have a robbery. It's an older song. I wouldn't call it country necessarily.
Can't remember.
And I remember we had to change one of the lyrics.
Little ditty, but Jack Diane. It's that one?
Two American kids living
in the heartland.
No. It's Billy Joe and Bobby Sue. Nothing much to do. Anyway, there's like get high and watch the tube. And so we had to change that to chew gum and watch the tube because, and then we had our two littlest kids who I think were both first graders. The two kids who played those roles were first graders. And so it was great because they didn't have to memorize any lines. They just had to come in. They had little bandit masks on. It was so cute. So I remember the one time Jared ever told me to get my poop in a group, which was, if you had to identify the roles that he and I had in our friendship, he was without a doubt he was the Uncle Jesse and I was the Bob Saget.
Yes.
Like I was all right, everyone, you got to be in bed by 9:00 tonight. And Jared's they're like,
you were the
turn off the lights
caretaker.
and then come back on.
You were the caretaker. He was the feral child, basically.
Right. Yep. And that's why I think we complemented each other so well.
Right.
You know, to me, a good friendship should have give and take, and you should despise the qualities in the person that you love so much because they are so perfect, because they're things that you probably need to work on yourself, sure. Right? So we always joked about how when I grew up, I didn't have any rules, and here I am a rule follower, and Jared had strict rules. So Jared's like, I'm never going to give my kids rules. They're going to do whatever they want. And I said, my kids are going to have a strict curfew and everything like that, and I'll end up with a bunch of Jareds, and he'll end up with a bunch of JJs. So during the end of the show, the cop finally has everything pieced together. It's a Columbo moment. Like, hold on, this is what happened. And found out that all of these people that gave him all these different stories were the bank was robbed. It was an inside job, and they were just all covering up for it. And so for that, John steps off stage and he's giving a monologue that they're essentially acting out while he's doing this monologue over the speakers. So John is standing next to me and I'm running the sound effects, and Jared is on the other side of John running the lights. We're on the side of the stage. It's very dark in our area. It's essentially backstage. And John goes, "This is what happened." And he farts. And I look up at him, not thinking that, I was like, did someone in the audience fart? What's going on? And he's got this smile on his face. And I start laughing, and John starts laughing. And he's laughing over the microphone. So he's like, and he can't get through the opening line, which then makes me laugh even harder. Now, the audience has no idea what's going on. They're laughing. The actors on stage, I remember Shelley breaking character and looking over and being like, what's going on? What's going on? It was just so perfect. And Jared goes, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. And he's about to pull the mic away from John so that he can just say it. And John and I was like, no. And so I turn away completely so I can't even see him. And John starts saying one word and I start laughing again because I just can't handle it. And Jared goes, get out of here. And he kicked me out of the backstage area, rightfully so. But to get out of the backstage area, I have to go through a door that's right behind us. We are inside of a metal Quonset that is their town hall with no windows. It is 7:00 in August. So the second I open that door that goes outside, a blinding North Dakota evening light comes pouring in and just everyone. But what's really beautiful is that was also the night they decided to tape the show.
Nice.
So
nice.
I can watch that anytime I want.
Nice.
And it's just
you
glorious.
have a copy of it?
I've got it, a
Nice.
copy, yeah.
Nice.
And then the very last year we were there, we decided we loved writing this last show so much because we could also write it to the specific kids. This must have been what it was like to be a part of those theater companies in New York in the 50s, 60s, and 70s where they wrote shows specifically for the company that was performing them. So we knew okay, this kid is a real brown noser. So we'll write a character that is a brown noser. So they're just playing a version of themselves on stage. And the very last year was one of our favorites. It was called Tuned In. And the premise of the show was two kids, John and Shelly, who are playing brother and sister. We stole this from Pleasantville, got sucked into a television, and then it's them going from channel to channel to channel. We also stole it from the Pam Dobson and John Ritter movie Tuned In, where the devil sucks them into a satellite dish. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. Eugene Levy's got an awesome role in it. Anyway, and then they get separated at one point, and so they go through all these television shows. So one of my favorite videos I have of Jared is at one point, Shelly gets sucked in, like gets onto a channel where the Brady Bunch is going on, and they sing the song "Shana na 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 na" with her. And so we do a musical number, and we choreographed it in the way we do, with like point, down point, hip thrust. And so it's Jared running the dance through for the kids, and he's doing the dance, and they're pretty much like mimicking him. And it was so out of his comfort zone that it was really neat to see him do that. Other little highlights of the time that we spent in Rutland. Shelly had horses, and so one time she was like, "Do you guys want to ride horses with us?" And we're like, "Yes, we do." But we first went to our costume tub, and we both dressed up like police officers so we could be mounted police. There was another time where Jared is riding horse with them, and he like got going a gallop too fast. The horse ran into some trees, and then the horse runs out of a tree, but there's no Jared. He had gotten smacked and was hanging from a limb, and he couldn't find his flip-flops after that. They were gone. They were just gone.
But I mean, he spent so much time in trees that was probably his he was like, "Oh, at least I'm safe up here."
Right, exactly. Like, it would have been different if he had gotten like swept off by like a grain, like a grain auger or something. Like, that would have been horrible.
Like if he was someone who's like, Uncle Jared, can you tell me what is it women want? Well, if you can climb a tree, make sure they see you do it.
Most relationships are like climbing a tree, Benjamin.
I have never found a woman that climbing a tree doesn't work on.
So another highlight is Jared always got into trouble. And I don't think that there was necessarily a mean bone in Jared's body, but there's definitely a rascal bone. And he led into that a lot, especially once he became the age of where drinking became a part of it. So the house we stayed at the first year, we were not welcomed back the second year. So they had to find a different house in Rutland. Yeah.
Wow.
That woman did not like us because she thought we didn't respect the Afghan that she had put on the couch. So I'm glad we weren't in that place. That place sucked.
Got it.
The
what
other
were you
house,
supposed to do for the Afghan? Like,
she was a nasty woman, and I'm glad that we didn't stay in her house again. So we stay in this other house, and we invented a game that we called Fireball, where we would soak new tennis balls in lighter fluid, light them on fire, throw them with a tong, and then someone would hit it with a bat. Now, if it had absorbed enough lighter fluid when you hit it with the bat, there'd be this giant explosion where the lighter fluid that was inside of the tennis ball would explode out, catching flame as it goes. So that was a good time. So one day, it's a Friday, and we had stopped for lunch. We took an hour-long lunch every day. This is the thing that no one told us. We were like, God, okay, so we gotta be in charge of these kids from 8 until 4 o'clock every day. We found out a lot of the other directors just directed ran stuff from 2 to 4.
Oh, really?
Like, they only had 2 hours every day, and I was like, are you kidding me?
Wow. Yeah. So you guys did like a full day daycare.
We were a daycare. Yeah. That's exactly what we were. So we break for lunch. We come back to the house. We're getting packed up so that as soon as rehearsal's done that day, we can drive back home for the weekend. And pound on the door. And Jake Harchie is with us. And because Jake ends up becoming our assistant, like the second year through the 5th year. So he comes down whenever he's available, and we had a blast with him. So this woman, she's like, "Are you Jared?" And I said, "Oh no, hold on one second." I said, "Jared, there's someone here to see you." And he's got a big smile, and he turns the corner and loses his smile immediately. And she's like, "Are you Jared?" And he goes, "Yeah." And she's like, "I live across the street, and you smashed the pumpkins that I grow for the children every year at the Harvest Festival. You smashed them. You smashed those pumpkins." He's like, I didn't. She's like, "Don't lie. And she goes, "I can't believe that you would do that." You're going to get a bill from me for all these pumpkins that you smashed. I can't believe that. You're just awful. She slams the door. She walks across the road to her house. And so Jared is, Jared never wanted someone to yell at him. He never wanted someone to be mad at him. And so this really takes a toll on him. And I was like, okay, I have to ask this, Jared, but did you do it? Like, did you smash the pumpkins? Even if it was just, for funsies? And he goes, I swear I didn't smash the pumpkins. I said, okay. I know how to take care of this. Just follow my lead. So we get back and there's a bunch of kids sitting outside the hall waiting to be let in. I unlock the door. They come in and usually they play lightning, like with basketballs until we were ready. And I said, everyone sit down right now. So they all sit down and I say, this production is done. I said, Jared, who goes out of his way to come down here and spend time with you guys, was just accused of smashing these pumpkins. Something he did not do. That is awful. That is ridiculous. And I want to know who did it, and I want to know right now. And if I don't find out in the next 15 minutes, you're done. This is the last day of rehearsal. You're done. And so luckily, one of the kids raised their hands because I wasn't fully prepared to like quit this job. So I was bluffing a little bit. They fell for it.
Good bluff though, yeah.
So one kid raised their hand. They're like, Philip did it. And I'm like, who is Philip? And they're like, oh, it's her grandson. And he smashed the pumpkins and he told some other people about it. I'm like, oh yeah? Interesting. And so I said, we're not going to rehearse anymore today. And you tell this Philip, I want to have a word with him. And so we get out of there and we go and we pack up and Shelly and Val, her older sister Val, show up like 2 minutes later and they've got a card and I think there's like a $20 bill. And it was a card from Shelly's mom saying, I'm so sorry that, Jared got accused of this. And some people just, some people should like check themselves before this goes on and she's going to have to eat crow. And I wanted to make it known because I was like, this town has been kind of dicks to us. Like there have been people who have not been as courteous and as nice as they should be to the people who are taking care of their kids all day. And I'm not saying you need to bring me a pie, but like, for God's sake, at least like say hello to me.
Sure.
Like don't treat me like I am, from a foreign planet.
Taking care of your troglodyte kids for you for a few months.
And so I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And I leave. Now, one of my biggest regrets is not immediately saying to Ione, Shelly's mom, don't worry, we'll be back. Their family experienced tragedy that weekend when one of Ione's sisters was killed in a car accident. Mm-hmm. So I had the displeasure of being a person who was hanging something over her head when something that actually did matter in the world. But Jared was so gracious when that woman came over on Monday and she did bake him a plate of cookies. And was like, I heard that it was my grandson and not you that smashed up the pumpkins. And I'm very sorry. He was the one who told me you had done it. And clearly he was a liar. And I'm in the back and I hear that and I'm like, you can say that again.
You said that?
Yeah. And I wanted to like take this woman to task for Jared,
Sure.
but because of his nature, he was like, no, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We've been neighbors across the street for a few weeks every year. And I appreciate this. Thank you so much. And
he took the right step. She came hat in hand and apologized,
yes.
Right? I've been in that situation before where someone told me someone else did something. So I went hard at them. And then the same day found out that person lied to me.
Yeah.
And I have to go immediately and apologize to the person. That happened at school with an ex-girlfriend of mine.
Ooh.
At the time, she was not my ex. But yeah, she accused some boys in our grade, this was 9th grade, of saying really bad things to her in class. Like really like sexual things. And I was livid. And so I told a teacher, I was like, I can't do anything about it because these guys are stronger than me, but I can get them in fucking trouble. And so I did. And then I went to my next class that she was in with a friend of hers. And she said, what did you do? And I said, I went there getting yelled at right now. And then she said, oh, they didn't actually say that. She felt bad because she thought I wasn't going to do anything. She thought that she would get sympathy from me if she made up a story about these guys
Sure.
talking about her chest and stuff like that. And so I knew what room the principals were all and my dad were all yelling at them in. It was these 3 guys I know, they were in my grade. And I realized when she told me, I was like, I'm the only person who can fix this now. She's not going to do it, right? I need to fix it. I'm the one who escalated it because I thought they had done something really vile and I didn't want it to continue. And so I went to the room that I knew they were all in and I just walked in and I just said, listen, she just recanted what she told me. She said she made it up. And so they let the guys go. And then I sat down and talked with the principals. I wasn't in trouble. They were happy that I had come clean about it. But that walking in and saying, I'm really sorry for how I responded, even though I wasn't technically in the wrong in that moment from what I thought was going on. But yeah, having to go and apologize for something that you messed up is not fun. It kind of, as I say it too, I should have broken up with her that day, but I didn't until the following year after a whole bunch of other crap, But what are you gonna do?
People want attention in odd ways, right?
Yeah. I had a girlfriend in high school who pretended to have multiple personalities on AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was a mess too.
I believe that.
That was a whole fucking thing.
I mean, my worst situation with my high school girlfriend was she didn't photograph well.
Yeah, I keep going like, how come I'm still single? Oh, that's right. I have such a terrible rogues gallery that I'm afraid to even bring another one in to the full. We'll have to do an episode about that.
Yeah, it can happen.
Yeah.
Right?
So the neighbor comes over and apologizes. Did she make Jared a pumpkin pie?
No, it was just a plate of cookies.
And her grandson just decided to smash her pumpkins, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because then after that, the kids thought they should be telling us everything that they learned in town for fear that we, now that we had turned the tap on, there was no turning it off.
Yeah.
And it was stuff like my dad doesn't have a job. And it was like, you know what? We'll ask you if there's something we need to know.
Why was Phil not in the theater program?
Philip's parents owned the town cafe. And this is kind of the tragedy. Philip was in the first 2 years and then wasn't after that because he had to wash dishes.
Okay.
And was essentially, everyone in the family had to work at this cafe to make it go.
Gotcha.
And it,
That
there
sucks.
were levels of poverty for sure in that small town, but I think part of it was just how kids weren't allowed to be kids for a bunch of it.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, and I bet in other ways, some kids just had the run of the town, go outside, play all day, do whatever you want.
Bike gangs.
Right.
They had a game that they played that they used the backyard space that was behind our second house. It was called Rutland Ball, and it was a variation on baseball. And I remember being one of the kids was like, yeah, and he's the best. I'm like, oh, he's good at this. They'll call him Home Run Huckle for nothing. Home Run Huckle. That should be a character in a movie, right? And then stepping up to bat was Home Run Huckle. Other adventures that Jared, and this is just the beginning. I mean, Jared and I lived together in Chicago in a garden. He found the apartment. I was living in Fargo at the time, and I had a near-death experience, and I decided I need to go back to Chicago and have some experiences. And he found the apartment that he and I would share. And I should have thought twice about it because he picked a garden level apartment that was fine, but it also wasn't because he had a Rottweiler.
Yeah.
Mitch
was a sweet dog.
Mitch was a sweet dog. Mitch pooped everywhere. Mitch knew how to open the refrigerator and eat literally everything, including 2,000 feet of film once, straight up celluloid film. Jared, before he graduated from Minneapolis Community and Technical College with his film degree, had to make his final film on 16 millimeter film with a separate sound recording that they would add the magnetic channel in later on. And the movie was about a park ranger helping out a guy who had slipped in the forest and broken his leg, and he and his girlfriend called the park ranger to help. And I played the park ranger, and Jared's like, just build a really big mustache for yourself. So I used liquid latex and spirit gum and hair, and I built this enormous mustache. And I was Harrison, the park ranger. And it's funny, your dad's in the movie too.
Really?
Because there's a graduation sequence with Phil Lund, Dave Brunsvold, and myself. And he looks to Phil and he goes, Kevin, I'm so proud of you. You're going to be a police officer. You're going to protect people. You are a hero. And then he goes to Davey, and he's like,
Phil and Davey.
And he goes, and he goes, Richie, you're going to be a firefighter. You're going to save many lives. And Harrison, you're a park ranger. What is that? What kind of a crap job is that? And so you find out I have these father issues. Now, what was really cool is we built this. It essentially was like 3 pipes, like so as a fake lake. So what we did is we dug a big hole in the snow, and we made Jake get into this hole, and then he's got one leg on the surface and one leg that is this fake leg that we had made that has kind of a fake knee joint in it, and it's got a foot and everything, but his other leg is like hidden underneath it. And it looked really good. Like, we did a good job with that. And so Jake spent the better part of 4 hours buried in snow. I'm surprised that his tallywhacker didn't freeze off. Because he's wearing snow pants, but then he's also wearing his costume snow pants too. Right. And Natalie played his girlfriend, and he was supposed to be this guy who's like, I learned everything I need to know from the Boy Scouts.
I've never seen this.
You've never seen this?
I don't think I've seen this.
God,
I remember helping on a shoot that had like a wizard or something. Like a wizard cane.
That was a fun one we did too.
Did that deal with cereal or something?
Yeah, where Jake and I were the subjects in a lot of his films. So I played a crossing guard in that.
That's right.
Who was a real jerk to Jake. I was constantly picking on him, and Jake sees a cereal box that says like free magic wand with 20 proofs of purchase, and he eats just a ton of cereal.
That's right.
And then he uses the magic wand to turn me into a pretty girl eating a chocolate bar. And then they go off hand in hand. Like, there's one where he's just gotten groceries, and I grabbed them, and it was 70 degrees out, I think. The snow was melting. It was a beautiful spring day. And I poured all of this milk all over Jake, and he just stunk. So, but this one, Jared's shooting on 16 millimeter, and it's a long day. It is a long, long day for us. And so and he scripts it, but not really. He's like, you guys just improvise this, like a little bit. Now, the problem with improvising when you're shooting on film is you really need to make sure how much film you have, right? Because it's not like video. You can't just roll and roll and roll.
Yep.
So after this long day, we get everything. Jared stops by Take Two Video where I'm working that night. And he's living in Minneapolis, but he's staying with his parents while he's in town. And he brings me a Snickers bar and a Diet Coke. And I'm like, oh, thanks, buddy. And he goes, you in a good mood? And I said, yeah, I am. And he goes, we have to redo like half of it because I think that I forgot to change the film out. And so we're going to have to redo half of it. And I'm like, and at this point, we had been frustrated during this shoot because unlike the milk shoot, this was really cold. And so the sound recorder was constantly not working.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, we'll do this. We'll do this again. So I went back and we refilmed it again. One of my favorite shots of this thing, though, is we had borrowed Phil Lund's car, which was this old beat up kind of Jeep. And I decided, okay, so this guy's on his way to go like save them. And I crash Phil's car into a snowbank. In fact, do you know where we filmed it?
No.
That park in Moorhead where we did the first Baby Bumpy short. So I had had filmed that, and I had already known that this is a very secluded park. And so I said, this will be the perfect place for us to go film like this new thing.
You had already done Baby Bumpy at that point? Okay, yeah.
So Jared has this great shot of I crash the thing, I get out and I start running, and he pans back to the car and the back tire is still spinning. Like it's still going. And so he makes this thing and it's done. Jared was also a part of a couple of the 48-hour film project things that we did in the cities, including the Mighty Whitey Tighty, which
that was a 48.
That was a 48, which I was not a part of, but it sure was fun to watch my friends rejoice and freak out when an Asian underwear fetish website found this and really just pushed it across the internet as far as it can go. The premise was there's Dustin Buchanan is a guy who only wears cowboy boots and then tighty whities and a cowboy hat and sunglasses. And he's this jerk, but everyone owes him a life debt, right? Like remember I stopped your dog from eating chocolate? Remember when I saved your life? And like this, and so he is riding in a carpool with these people, even though he doesn't have a job.
That's still a great concept of someone who is so socially unacceptable, but they've done so much for you that there's just no way you can turn them away.
At one point, when he's in the carpool, he's smoking 2 cigarettes, and one of the best lines is from our friend J. Scott Miller in the back, and he goes, "Whitey, could you put out one of those cigarettes?" It's that short is just to die for.
That's fantastic. I hope you have copies of all of this stuff.
I do. In fact, I just recently found like a couple DVDs I had, and so I was like, I should rip these.
Yeah.
And then I found like my mom, for some reason, my mom had a file on her laptop called Home Movies.
Okay.
And in the file was a ton of this stuff that I had made. I was like, I didn't know my mom was archiving all of this stuff. Thank you, Patty.
Yeah, yeah.
Jared,
you have anything on VHS, let me know. I can digitize it for you. Real easy.
I've got a Blender's tape that you should digitize
yes,
for me.
please. Is that the one from your sister's birthday?
It is, yeah.
Hopefully,
very early Blenders.
Hopefully it's not the degraded copy, because I remember you had a copy that barely played.
Yep.
But
this one I think is better.
I might be able to power through that too. But anyways.
Get ready, Tim Casper.
Yeah.
So another highlight was I wanted to go to Los Angeles, and so did Jared. And so we decided, let's drive to LA. And this would have been the winter of 2003, like right after New Year's 2003, because Jared and I both, it would have been his first semester at college, and I was still trying to figure out what to do with my life because my dad was sick at the time. So we knew we were going to stay in Laramie, Wyoming with my my friend of the family, Wes Hansen, and then we were going to drive to LA after that. So we get to Laramie, we have a good time. We find out like that. This is the trip where we discover Patton Oswalt. This is the trip where we discover a ton of comedians, because I just had like this iPod and I filled it up with a ton of the stuff. And Jared was working at Cheapo Discs.
Yeah, that's right.
In uptown Minneapolis.
That's right.
And so they could buy anything in the store for 25 cents. And so he just had this massive pile. Wow. This was also a trip.
That's such a good deal.
This is a trip, like this is how long our road trip was. Using the heater in the car, we would have to stop listening to CDs because it would overheat. And so there were times where we had to just drive in silence for half an hour while we like didn't do anything. So we'd have to talk. And at one point we were discussing about this future where there are movies that we have seen so many times that we would just like the audio from the movies because we know everything that's going on. Like, wouldn't it be neat if you could put a DVD in here and it could just play the music? And in all honesty, we have that now, right? Like you could, if you had a movie that you knew well enough, you could just Bluetooth it into your you know, play it on your phone and Bluetooth it and then not watch the actual video and enjoy aspects of that. We had a really good time on that trip. And I remember we stayed in Bing Crosby's old mansion because a friend of my aunt who was from high school was the head of marketing for Universal Studios. And she's like, well, I'll be in Paris for the month with my husband, but you're more than welcome to, stay in our mansion. We'll let the caretaker know that you're coming. And like their backdoor neighbor was Gary Marshall.
Oh, wow.
And their next door neighbor was Alan Thicke.
Did you see him out walking at all?
Yeah, Alan Thicke came over and dropped something off.
No kidding.
And that was pretty sweet. And then we found out that the mansion itself had been used in the show 24. Like in the second season, there's a wedding that's taking place. So it was, that was quite the adventure that we had in Los Angeles. And because we're two young guys, we both are comedy nerds, we could do stuff like we went to the Improv and we just stayed there the whole day. We bought one ticket and watched every single show. So we saw like these comedians like Jimmy Pardo had like not broken like onto the national scene yet. And so we got to see him and I'm like, oh my God, this guy speaking my language. And that night, David Spade did a guest set, and they had said before he came out, they're like, all right, our next performer, please, no, it was like no photography. And Jared didn't have a cell phone that took pictures. He had like a click load film camera. And so click, and the flash goes off. And David Spade is like, look at this idiot over here. Don't you, parlay Espanol. And that was, I mean, we got into some shenanigans that were crazy. And
I
then,
could see Jared be like, oh, a rule? That's not meant for me.
That's not meant for me. So we drive up to Disneyland one day, and we have just the time of our life. In fact, one of my favorite photos that I have is Jared and I each took a picture of each other while we were on the Mad Hatter's teacups. And so we're in front focus, but everything behind us is like swirling.
Sure.
The photos just look awesome, right? Okay. And it's a good to me, it's a great way to reminisce about like that trip. We also got to be in front of the actual Mystery Machine when we did the Warner Brothers tour.
Oh, the official
one
that they use in the movie. You're saying
in the movie, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I was like in the cartoon. You saw the official one,
and we have a great photo of it's Disneyland, and it's right before we're leaving. And I've got Mickey ears that say JJ, and he's got ones that say Nilles. And I've got my arm around him, and he's got his arm around me, and it was taken from behind. So it's us looking at like the Magic Kingdom. And it was after we were driving back, and we both took shifts driving back and forth. And I said, Jared, according to this map, we're only like 2.5 hours away from Tijuana. And he goes, we're going to leave LA tomorrow. We're going to cut our trip short. We're going to go to Tijuana. I said, okay. So we go to Tijuana. And there are things that I can fully say now will die with me that no other person on this planet knows about. But one story that I had to tell immediately when we got home, and I've told countless people, is we're in Tijuana. It's the first week of January. It's midweek. No tourists. There's nobody there. And so we're in the main drag of Tijuana. And Tijuana goes like, have you ever been to Tijuana?
Nope.
Tijuana is pharmacy, bar, strip club. Pharmacy, bar, strip club.
It's like
pharmacy,
Vegas,
bar,
then,
strip club.
basically.
It is very reminiscent. And everyone, there's hype people outside of all of these things.
Very much like Vegas.
Telling you to come in, like come in. And so we end up in like 6 different gentlemen's clubs. Mm-hmm. And they're all like, come in and free beer and free tequila for you gentlemen, for you gringos. Mm-hmm. So we go in there, like, I drank more Dos Equis that night and took awful tequila shots. And so we go into this one club, and there's nobody in there, but there's like 9 women working. And so you're the only one there. So you get all the attention, right? And I had put my wallet in my breast pocket, and I buttoned it shut, and I caught a girl trying to like pickpocket me. And I was like, And so at one point, Jared gets pulled up on stage because we're the only people there, right? He gets pulled up on stage, and they take his shirt off first, and then they do this thing where they pull down his pants, and then they're about to start a sex act on him. And he goes, no. And so then they grab, and I hear rip. And this girl's got one leg of his underpants in her hand, and the other girl has ripped. So now there's only an elastic band around him, and he's like covering himself up. And they're, they're like, oh, yes. And so we get out of there, but I am having the time of my life, right? Like, this is just so good to me. This is so wonderful. So we get out, and I'm like, that's crazy, man. Like, that was crazy. And we take about 5 steps, and there's a guy outside the bar. And he's like, hey, would you 2 gentlemen like to come in and have some drinks on the house? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And upstairs we've got dancing, real women. And I said, what? And he goes, real women. I said, well, why do you say that? And he goes, oh, well, you don't want to go into a bar where it's not actual women and it's just young men who look like women, like this place next door. And I was like, oh, making it even more debaucherous. And that night we walked across the border. So we took a bus. We parked like at the last exit, and then we took a bus for $5 into Mexico into Tijuana. And so the first thing that we did when we got there is Jared told me, he's like, I'm really good at negotiations with like street vendors. I'm like, okay. So we find two,
because he's done so much of it.
we find two enormous sombreros. Like we're talking, they have to be 5 feet in diameter. Like they're massive. And Jared's going back and forth with this guy, and this guy wants $20 American per sombrero. And he's back and forth. And Jared's like, no, I think we're going to walk. And I was like, Senor, this poncho, 2 sombreros, and these belt clips that look like gun holsters for beer, I'll give you $30 American right now. And he's like, sold. I'm like, Jared, that's how you do it, buddy. If he's a stickler on a price, you just add some more goods to it.
Yep.
That's the first thing we do. So when we're walking across the border at 4:00 in the morning, we're wearing giant sombreros, a poncho, and both of us have Coors Lights in little pouches with us. We're the American tourists that make America look bad. So we now have to walk the 8 miles back to the parking lot that our car is in.
8 miles?
Yeah, because it's the last parking lot like before the border, right? Like there's not stuff in between where you can like do this. So we walk back there and we get in the car and I was like, Jared, I'm definitely drunk and you're definitely drunk. We should sleep this off. He's like, absolutely, absolutely. So we both get in the back seat and we both go to bed. And at one point, we both wake up and look at each other, and we have no idea where we are. We have no idea what's going on. We are definitely not in the parking lot that we were in earlier.
Oh.
We are now at some gas station, and I'm like, what the hell happened? He goes, well, I woke up like 2 hours ago, and I thought I was okay to drive, and so... Turns out I wasn't, and so I pulled over again, and I'm like, what? Are you goddamn kidding me? So we wake up, and we both drink like a pot of coffee, and we drive straight to Provo, Utah, which has, I believe, the distinction of being like the highest Mormon, highest Mormon percentage per capita.
Okay.
And we visit our friend Randy, and here I am, and I'm like, I can't tell Randy anything about what happened yesterday. And I noticed that when Jared gets up to go to the bathroom, we ate at like a taco place, and he still had the elastic of his boxers. I could see when his shirt came up that he still had the elastic on under his pants. And it was like that trip, honestly, was one of the most fun times I have had in my entire life. And I can't even begin to scratch the surface of some of those stories that we had from there because there were so many. And Jared alcoholism ran in his family, and Jared was a victim of alcoholism and could never find the opportunity to get that under control, even when it seemed like it was something that he was seeking help for. It just was too deep. It was too hard. And Jared was in a train accident where, for whatever reason, if he had opened it because he was smoking, a faulty door, no one knows. But he was on an Amtrak heading back to Chicago to relive his dream after coming home after a traumatic brain injury he had suffered while drinking. He fell out of a moving train and fell onto the tracks of another commuter rail. And one thing that will always just haunt me is that I had been in Chicago that weekend before. It was St. Patrick's Day weekend, and Jill and I were on that train that was passing his train. So the odds of us being on the train that actually hit him,
no way,
is it's almost a guarantee. And I remember trains in Fargo leave and arrive very, very late, right? So we're talking like 3, 4 in the morning, something like that. And I remember we had a sleeper car. Jill and I got into like a little sleeper car for the way home, and I could not go to sleep. And I thought it was claustrophobia because it gets to be so tight when you're in there once they put everything down. And I don't know what it was, but there was something outside of me that said that something wasn't right. It didn't feel right. And the next afternoon, I got a call at about 3:00 in the afternoon, and it was from Travis Steffen. And he laid out the fact that Jared had died the night before, and, will never know exactly what happened. It became a media frenzy, which is never fun to deal with. Helping plan that funeral was tough, and we ended up Jeremiah Hammerling, if we ever get him as a guest on this show, I have never seen a man so mad in my entire life as Jeremiah was during the funeral proceedings during that, because
Messed up funeral.
it was a messed up funeral, right? And it was the first loss for our friend group that was devastating. That you saw someone, when you hear someone say like, gosh, they had their whole life in front of them, is even though Jared was at the absolute rock bottom that we could all picture in his life with alcoholism, we all still thought that there was, there's a potential that we were going to see the old Nilly at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wednesday before that, right before I left for Chicago, we had a Line Benders improv show, and Jared came to it. And right after the show, we all went out to the parking lot to kind of like be like, hey, awesome. And Jared came out, and I refused to even look at him. I was so mad at him for the choices he was making. I wouldn't look at him. I wouldn't acknowledge him, even though he was greeting me with a smile and he was congratulating me on a good show. And I have held on to that for 11 years now, of the fact that I should have found that same grace that he had with that woman in Rutland. And I should have at least wished him luck and given him one last hug. And I'll never get that. But what I can do, though, is I can let future generations know about this amazing guy who made such a huge impact on not only my life, but the lives of so many people around. And don't get me wrong, I'm also not putting him on a pedestal and saying he was a saint, because he certainly was not. The farthest thing from it. But I also think that that's the beauty of who Jared was, right? To err as human.
Right.
And no one was more human than Jared Nilles.
Right. And, it's, as having lost many friends myself, I know how it feels to go, you never know when the last moment's going to be that you have with someone, right? So it's nearly impossible to, quote, do it right. And I think one thing you should hopefully keep in mind is that in that moment, it wasn't like Nilly was coming and apologizing to you or trying to make good on something he had messed up. He'd hurt you. He'd done a lot of stuff that had just messed life up, and you were appreciably and understandably upset about that. But it doesn't help when that's the last memory you have with someone that you cared so deeply about. I'm so sorry that you carry that with you, but if I did not know Jared nearly as well as you did. I knew him through you. I knew a lot of that circle through you. But he would be the last person to want you to feel bad about that moment. He really wouldn't have been someone who was like, that's right, you feel that way. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it was an accident. His death was an accident. There's no way anyone could have, we all kind of felt like something bad might happen because bad things were happening, but that was just an accident, pure and simple. And it's not your fault at all. I think about, many of my friends and the last moment I had with them. And in a few cases, I knew there was a good chance it was the last moment I was having with them. And I wasn't proud of how I did because it was too hard. So if we're lucky, we get that last memory with someone as just being a nice, happy moment. And then the Band-Aid gets ripped off and you have to move on from there.
And to me, it's not that, like let's say today was the last day I was ever going to see you, right?
Right.
So no matter what, when we leave, I'm not going to shed a tear and give you a hug that like I pull you in extra deep, right? Because I don't assume that this is the last time I am ever going to see you. But that one, that one hurt. And I don't care what your, people's beliefs are or what it is, but there was something in the universe signaling me that night when I was coming home that was telling me that something wasn't right in the world. And
yeah, that was messy. And it wasn't long after that we lost Dustin.
Right.
I think it was within the same year, wasn't it?
It was 6 months later.
6 months later, and that was a weird year, especially for you and your closest circle of friends, for sure.
I received a message from the theater director over at Moorhead after Dustin, and it was, JJ, I really don't know you at all. We've been in the same room a few times, but your circle of friends have had to deal with more this year than most people have had to deal with their whole lives. And I will always remember that as someone who just reaches out and says something simple like that.
Last year, it was almost a year from this month, I think, that I saw Mama Luke for the last time. And that was an instance where it was like, there's a high degree of likelihood that this is my last time with my grandmother. And that is hard in its own way because you have to leave at some point. You can't just stay there by her bedside forever.
Right. She's
slipping in and out of consciousness, but she knows that I'm there. And the moment I got up to go, what I read on her face was that I know you have to leave. I love you too. Go. And I think about that. And that was a very specific, like, am I doing the right thing right now? Because I do have to go. I have to get on the road. Right. I need to get home. I can't stay in this old folks' home. I can't be by her bedside in this room that smells really bad, and watching my grandmother forget who I am every few seconds and then remember who I am when she touches me and then forget who I am again. It's that kind of thing. Putting a pet down. Those times where you have to make the choice. This is it. This is the end, probably right here. And that is, because I haven't had an ending like, say, with Jared, where it was not just, it was that dramatic, right? I mean, getting run over by a train is a dramatic way to die. It's a really fucking crazy.
Incredibly.
Only Jared, right, would have probably found the weirdest fucking way to die. But
I'll tell you this much: it forever has marred St. Patrick's Day for me. There's that scene in Gremlins and Gremlins 2 where Phoebe Cates tells the story of why she hates Christmas and then why she hates President's Day because of personal tragedy that she associates with it. I was in Chicago for the first time ever over St. Patrick's Day since Jared died, and it hit different, right? Because you just, you just all of a sudden be like, oh yeah, the last time we were here, and then that happened.
Yep. Yeah, that notion of, it's weird to think about, because I think maybe the weirdest thing about being aware of death is understanding that the party continues. The party goes on without you, right? It's not that life is over. It's that my life is over. I am going either somewhere else or nowhere else, but I know it's not here where all these people are. That's the thing that I wonder about when I think about just my own death, is would I rather it happen without me knowing it's about to happen, or would I rather spend the time going through the anguish of knowing these are the last moments?
I think one of the things I became obsessed with when I wanted to be in movies was the fact that you get to live on in some way afterwards. But just recently I was asking kids, do you know who Fred Astaire is? Do you know who Ginger Rogers is? Do you know who John Wayne is? They said, oh yeah, John Wayne was in some movies, but certainly if I had put a lineup, could not identify who John Wayne was. For Fred Astaire, blank, blink, blink. And I think to myself that, everyone, even if you are one of the biggest stars in the world, even if they're going to name an airport after you, there is a real chance that only 0.0000001% of us end up in the history books in some way, shape, or form.
I think about over at Theater B, we all loved Matthew Burkholder, who was a massive part of the company. So we have his picture up on the wall. We have a artist fund that's named after him. We've sort of done what we can to immortalize him within that organization. But if Theater B is a successful organization long term, that means there's going to be turnover. That means all of us will leave one day. Those of us who knew him. Even right now, it's got members of the company who didn't know Matthew, right? Or at least didn't know him that well. And so it means something to us to have the Actors Fund named the Matthew Burkholder Actors Fund. But it won't always be called that. It just won't. That's the way it goes. And we shouldn't also make following generations be beholden to our grief, right? Yep. The ways that we want to immortalize people. I think you hit the nail on the head with that sort of notion of immortality. I forget who the quote is from. Maybe it's Oscar Wilde, but I'm not certain. I believe the quote is, the past is not dead. In fact, it isn't even past. And I think about the fact that, it's still now.
Mm-hmm.
It still exists in some way now. And that's why I love old videotapes. That's why I love finding stuff at thrift shops that I digitize that two people will care about, because maybe it's the kids of those people that were in that video that would have never had any access to this, right? Imagine having video like that at the time of the Revolutionary War, or any, you name the moment, because these were people who walked the earth and lived lives and loved and lost and ate and pooped and did all those things.
Yeah.
And if you can, the fact that you have all this great footage of Nilles, right? I'm one of the biggest blessings I have right now is because since I've always been interested in movie making, and so you put your friends in your movies, I have all this footage of my friends just being goofy, having
Which
a great time.
is so lucky.
So lucky to have. It's going to be weird at some point too in your life, because at some point you're going to be able to load up all the content of Nilles you have into an AI, and it's going to be able to recreate a Nilles for you to talk to. That will be like, I know you're not Nilles, but this is weird.
This is close.
This is pretty darn close,
Mm-hmm. I miss him.
Yeah.
I miss him a lot. And I don't know where he would be today. I mean, if he hadn't died 11 years ago today, maybe he would have died 11 years ago tomorrow, right? I can't predict what would have been, but I do know that I smile fondly when I think of my friend, and I have a very good time when I reminisce about the things that we did. And I really love the fact that the stories can all now be from my perspective, which make me ultimately look better. Like in this whole trip to LA, I never even talked about when I pissed in a bag in the car while he was telling me, you better not, you better not. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. So the reason he told me not to pee in that bag was because we were stuck in traffic, and he was right, because he goes, now you just have to hold a bag with piss in it.